Welcome back to your third week, your third module of VPK 340. And this week we're going to be looking really at communication. How do we communicate our messages to the people that we want to communicate to? And how do we know which people to actually talk to and what messages are going to resonate with them in particular? So this week's concepts really focus on health communication and a concept called social marketing. We'll specifically look at health marketing, a form of social marketing. So before we get into that in the future modules, I just have a few definitions to get us started and to get us all on the same page. Okay, so a term that we're going to throw around a little bit, but it's not going to be our main focus, is this concept of health literacy. Like, do people have the basics of a health understanding, or kind of a basic understanding of health, so they can actually hear new health information and understand what it means? Okay, so the capacity of an individual to obtain, interpret, and understand basic health information. And they usually need like a little bit of a foundation in health or biology typically to do that. And this is something that is important if we're working with a population that doesn't have any health literacy. How are we going to target a message to someone that actually doesn't know the foundations of health? That's going to be a different type of message than one that we would tailor to someone that has more of a foundation on basic health concepts and can interpret and understand the basic health information that we are providing them, if that's what we're doing. And speaking of basic health information, this is something that we are more likely to do with a concept called health education. And in the United States, health education is actually it's a profession. Like, there's people that have jobs in health education. Here in Canada, that exists too, but it's less of a professional organization. Okay, so health education, it's more like education, like this class. This class is technically health education as well. So they're planned opportunities for people to learn about specific health concepts, to learn about health in order to make changes in their behavior. Okay, but we're educating. It's really about knowledge translation. And sometimes I know when I was a student, maybe you as a student, you're learning about all these things in health and you're like, oh, now that I know all these things, I'll tell all my friends. And now when I tell all my friends, then they're going to change their behavior. Okay, but just educating people about the basics of health doesn't necessarily change their behavior. However, they do need that basic education first, right? And that's what health education focus on. It's knowledge translation. It's just like, hey, I know what things cause cardiovascular disease and how you can reduce your risk of it. Here are those things. Okay, so it's often like do's and don'ts. Health communication is like that one step further. And the big difference here is that with health communication, I am trying to push people a little bit to change their behavior. So yes, there might be elements of health education in there, but really there's like a call to action, and that might be subtle or it might be really direct as well. Right? So we're trying to get people excited or to care enough about a particular health behavior so they start engaging in it. Okay, so it's a process that kind of goes beyond health information. Okay, and like it says here, there is kind of this motivation component to it, or an inspiration component to it. Okay, we want people to do something. There's a call to action with health communication. Okay. And the thing about communication is we can communicate in all sorts of ways. So you guys are going to be communicating with your first assignment in that social media post where I'm asking you to do a health communication piece. And the big difference here than a health education piece is that in a health communication piece, there is a bit of a call to action. There is like a, hey, consider this and then do that, right? Or just do that or this. There is more of that, like I keep saying, that call to action, okay? But we communicate in other ways as well. We communicate with our body language. We communicate with the frequency and tone of our voices. We communicate in depending on where we're even relaying a message to. These are all different ways that we can communicate ourselves. Okay, so like I said, that social media post, that's one way, but there's other ways that we're able to get our messages across. So one of the things that's really important in communication is we have to really think about what we're saying or what we're trying to communicate in a way that we're actually doing the thing we're trying to do, or we're providing that meaning to the receiver that actually is going to be relevant for that person. So we really have to understand the population we're trying to target and how they're going to interpret what we're saying. And we also have to be aware of us, of ourselves, or the organization that we work for. What is the receiver? What is the receiver of that message? What do they kind of think of that person sending the message? And how are they coming across? There's a lot of talk today about these days about the concept of authenticity, and building trust as well. And if a message that you're communicating is coming from an inauthentic or like a high and mighty, like I know better than you, you don't know what you're talking about, let me come help you and show you what you need to know, that's not really going to do what we want it to do. So we really have to have an understanding of our audience and of ourselves when we're trying to really communicate this message with purpose and with a clear intention. Okay, so that's this concept of meaning-centered communication, key to good health communication. However, health communication is difficult these days, and you can read the slide yourself. There's a lot of barriers to really getting a message across, and it's probably pretty obvious to you guys and all of us that there's a lot of disinterest and distrust in science these days. And I can kind of understand it sometimes, like sometimes the messages coming out from science don't seem clear, they seem conflicting, or people worry about like what kind of organizations people work for. We have to really understand what our population kind of thinks about how we're framing a message, and the context of that message and how kind of barriers they might have to actually hearing the meaning we want to give to them, okay? Also, some people have more privilege in their level of, let's say, health literacy or health education. So when we're working with these kind of groups, we have to understand that our messaging might have to be different, right? And we might have to approach it in a different way. And again, one of the best ways to approach it is to work with these groups and figure out, what kind of values or things are going to communicate to them better, are going to be useful to help us communicate to them better, okay? So this sentence is great here. Despite the presence of an impressive evidence base, professional credentials, and good intentions from the messenger, the public's response to messages from the scientific community can be one of disinterest or mistrust. And we have to be aware of that. And we have to also recognize, the roles we've played in some of that and some of the attitudes that people have when they know more than others on a particular subject. It's like, listen to me, I'm the authority. Well, for most of us, when we hear listen to me, I'm the authority, it kind of promotes a little bit of resistance. So these are things we need to keep in mind when we're trying to communicate our particular message.